Good morning and welcome to the breakout session for Enterprise Integration Summit. This is the session for IBM, and let me reintroduce to everyone Kim Clark, Integration Architect in IBM Offering Management. Kim, welcome back to Enterprise Integration Summit.
Thanks, Vince. It's great to be here.
You know, we're really glad to have Kim with us. He works day to day as a strategist on IBM's hybrid integration portfolio and spends much of his time, in fact, assisting customers who need to mature and have their integration architecture keep up with the new projects that are driving the digital business. In fact, Kim loves connecting the dots between product features and customer needs, having spent at least the last 2 decades working to help customers embrace all sorts of integrations in their day, SOA, BPM, APIs, and now microservices. He is also a noted author on integration best practices and design, and his most recent post is on hybrid integration reference architecture. And in fact, in his session, he's going to give us a drill down into that expertise in a reference architecture for hybrid integration. He's going to tackle many of the top-of-mind issues that are facing application data and integration stakeholders all working together to deliver the digital enterprise. Just a quick reminder, if you haven't already done so, let me recommend you download Kim's slides. They're available right here in the link under the viewing area. Kim and his team have also worked together to bring us some terrific added resources for those of you tackling hybrid integration. Those PDF resources are available here right now. No extra registration required. And we love your questions. So to communicate with Kim, just type into the question box. And now, Kim, let me turn it back to you and tell us about a reference architecture for hybrid integration.
Thanks, Vince, and great to be talking through. I mean, these last couple of decades have been quite something for the integration area, and big changes have happened, and we've seen integration move from something that was very enterprise-focused to now something that's on the front edge of what we can achieve in digital transformation. Probably a good way to start looking at this is to look at some of the common use cases for hybrid integration as they settle in within digital transformation initiatives. So there's really 3 primary areas that we see integration focused in. The first one is what we're hearing about all the time, APIs, joining the API economy, so exposing your existing data and functionality from your existing systems and exposing that as APIs that you can potentially monetize, or at the very least increase your market share and increase your focus through making those APIs available to partners to build innovative solutions. That's an extension, if you like, of what we're trying to achieve in service-oriented architecture, but that was more enterprise-focused, and this is outside of the enterprise. But moving on, there's also always going to be a focus on cost and cost saving, and also just simply making people more efficient. So the second use case is really focused on productivity and looking at how we can make people able to spend more time on the value-added tasks of their work and less time moving data between systems. Now, of course, this has only got worse as we've got more and more systems that people use. The amount of different software as a service capabilities that business users are working with on a daily basis means that there's more and more places where we've got duplications of data and reasons to be sort of swivel chairing between different systems. So we're only going to see an increase in the need for that kind of automation. And then the final one, if you like, is building on some of those things, but adding a lot more. So where a company wants to really step forward, an enormous leap forward, a shift to more composable, agile applications. They want to start building more business-led applications at the speed of the business. This is typically using things like microservices architecture to build lightweight componentry. And that's a radically different platform and a radically different paradigm. And so to do that, we need to think about integration differently. We need to think about where we place primary sources of data differently. And it does require some really new challenges. Of course, we soak up some of the other use cases. So yes, exposing those microservices as APIs is part of it, but it's only part of it. There's a lot more to talk about in terms of data synchronization and managing the broader microservice architecture overall. So that's 3 core routes into what's going on in integration in digital transformation space. If we look at this phrase hybrid integration, what do we mean by hybrid? Well, there's 4 different dimensions really. And the first one is the fact that we're seeing different user communities wanting to achieve integration. So it's no longer just the specialists in the IT department that are pulling together as a team and using these complex tools to build sophisticated integrations. There's a lot of other people that want to get involved in integration, but they might not call it integration. They might not see it as integration, but they want to do integration that makes sense for their role. The second one is integration styles. So if you like, architectural patterns are built up over time for API style integration, very real time, application integration, the more sort of traditionally asynchronous hub and spoke, data integration, that sort of batch-based processing. We've treated these in isolation often in the past, but we're seeing more and more of a need to be able to bring those together into a single set of solutions so that we can traverse across the different patterns more cleanly. And then we've got connectivity, of course, which is fundamentally hybrid. We're now having to connect to things that are not just across the entire enterprise, but are reaching out across the various different places on the internet in different infrastructure as a service, software as a service, different styles of integration. Those software as a service applications tend to be built API first. They're built interface first, because that's the way that they first interact. And that changes the way that you can look at them, because you can then build more intelligent connectors that say, okay, I actually understand that specific application, not just a technology connector anymore. And then we've got the deployment aspect. If we're going to have applications and our devices spread across this large surface area, then of course we're also going to need to spread the integration portfolio itself. So sometimes we're going to need to have things close to the data. Sometimes we're going to need to have things living in a cloud-native environment. Sometimes we want to have things as software as a service so that we don't have to worry about how the infrastructure is controlled. So there's a lot of different deployment considerations as well. So let's just look down into one of those areas, which is the idea of deployment aspects and how that's spread out. So what's really changed is the ownership boundary of the enterprise. So where before we would probably have considered the enterprise boundary to be the physical walls of the buildings you're working in, and maybe some data centers that you own and so on. Now we can obviously extend that to things like infrastructure as a service. So software would be IBM's version of that, or even platform as a service with Bluemix, where you ask for runtimes and they're maintained in the background for you. All those areas are also part of your ownership boundary, as are the dedicated areas of software as a service that you use. So if you use a CRM system like Salesforce, the chunk of Salesforce that contains all of your data, that's also part of your ownership boundary as well. So we need to treat all of those different areas as first-class entities. They are all part of your ownership boundaries, and integration across those boundaries needs to be as clean as it would be within the enterprise. And then, of course, we've got to get outside the enterprise to the wider surface area, making customers able to access data, business partners having perhaps special contractual ways of getting in as well. So the surface area has changed, and that's very much a hybrid in nature. We're going to progressively build up the hybrid integration architecture, and here is the simplest view. So this is saying that at the base we have a set of systems of record, your primary systems that contain all of your key customer data and all the data that really matters to the organization. The larger the organization and the longer it's been around, the more critical those systems are, but also probably the older they are and the more difficult they are to connect to. And so a lot of what was going on in those years that we were talking about at the beginning, service-oriented architecture, and the time before that, where we're doing the low-level connectivity, was trying to unlock those systems, trying to unlock the data from those systems. And we still need that. We're still going to need to be able to connect to COBOL copybooks, talk to transactional messaging environments, talk to a myriad of different databases. And so we've got componentry in the portfolio that's been doing that for quite literally decades and allowing us to achieve that sort of integration. And so, it's the same runtimes as you might recognize our products as Message Broker in the past, now IBM Integration Bus. Those same components that are sitting in the portfolio as enterprise service buses, allowing you to connect to the back ends. There's more to do though, in terms of composing things as APIs. we've started to see coming into the product range this more first-class notion of exposing things as services, exposing things as RESTful APIs, and recognizing that that's not just a particular protocol, but it's actually a first-class way of exposing things and being able to see those quickly in the tooling. What's interesting is events. So we've always had events, we've always had messages, we've always had messaging systems and things, but what we've never had really is events becoming first class in the way that things like APIs and web services have. That idea of being able to go to a catalog of APIs like the programmable web and be able to sort of pick out the things you want, that's never really been there for events. We've had Atom feeds and RSS feeds, we've had newer things would be sort of webhooks, but we still haven't seen anything that's really come through. And so that's something we're expecting to see coming through as more of a first-class component as we go forward. And then data synchronization take a broad banner of different things, really, looking across the piece at various different aspects of that automation aspect, really, trying to synchronize data from one place to another, whether that's in batch, whether it's in small events, whether it's actually just moving a process forward rather than synchronizing events, all of those different capabilities. And then above that, of course, we need a gateway. So for things like events and APIs, it's all very well to actually expose something as a REST service, but there's more we need to wrap around that. We need to make it available to the developers that are going to use it, provide portals for them, enable them to establish a relationship effectively with us, a subscribe relationship with us that says what they're going to use, allow them to look at their usage, allow them to explore the APIs they've got, and allows us to control the usage of those. And so a clean gateway. But we're still typically talking about within the enterprise for these sort of exposure of APIs. We'll come on to external exposure later. And then, of course, above that, we write the business value add applications that make use of all of those APIs. On the right, you can see we've talked about cloud affinity rather than explicitly putting a line across the diagram and saying these things are on premises, these things are in the cloud. We talk about cloud affinity, systems of record more likely to be on premise, and the cloud native applications, perhaps microservices, perhaps more likely to be written in the cloud. We do that deliberately, and that's very much the case for all of the portfolio. We expect that you will need to use and deploy the pieces of the integration portfolio wherever you need them. We provide that capability there as well. So I mentioned one layer of APIs there, but there's really at least two. We have system APIs that are focused on unlocking those systems of record, which is mostly what I was talking about on the previous slide. But then there's interaction APIs, and this is really the APIs that we're mostly talking about when we talk about the API economy. So these are the APIs that are targeted at a particular business sector. They're targeted at the particular market. They're more like a product. You're actually trying to sell a product or sell your data in a particular way. And so you expect to see that as a much more business-focused activity than the system APIs themselves. So really we've got two layers of APIs to deal with. One, surfacing the things that are known, core systems of record within the organization, and another one, providing the business advantage on top of that. So how do we represent that in the architecture? So we've got simply another gateway, and it's more than that, as we'll see as we talk further about how we would compose the things underneath that. But in essence, what we're trying to do is provide two hierarchical levels of gateway, and it could be more. It could be different levels of gateways. It could be horizontally split as well across different domains. Really, the point we're trying to get to here is that we have logically lots of separate gateways. In reality, physically, they could be the same gateways under the covers. We can split our gateway product into different domains, and it's impossible for you to realize that you're actually using the same infrastructure under the covers. You're simply administering a domain of APIs. And that's the way it should be, that effectively the virtualization is happening on top of the infrastructure there. And so multiple different gateways catering to different audiences and enabling them to administer things in their own way. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. But what we are starting to see is a very clear split between, if you like, two different parts of the architecture. And if you've read up about Conway's law, you'll recognize that the architecture and the organization often reflect one another. So we could look at that too. So what we're often seeing now is that rather than just focusing integration on the IT department, And of course, the traditional deep ESB products being right down at the level of a application integration specialist, challenging tooling that allows you to do really powerful things, but needs someone who's a specialist in that tooling to do it. We've recognized that there's a need for there to be a much broader set of people that want to use the tooling. Broader set of people that might want to use the tooling within IT potentially. We could be stretching out to developers and things that want to do integration within IT, and they don't want to spend time focused on learning integration tooling, they just want to use it. But actually also we're seeing the line of business starting to break out shadow IT departments or digital IT departments that are funded directly by the business and are focused purely on market and business value. They're building out things as effectively products. You see the overlap here. We've got data scientists and developers, for example. There's roles that could be in one of those teams, just as they could have been in the central IT department. They might instead be recruited directly into a business department to write new microservice applications, to write new mobile applications. And that spreads all the way across to the non-technical users as well. So to the software as a service application user, the person who works with Salesforce and Eventbrite and Marketo and a number of different online systems on a daily basis. They need to be able to perform integration. And they don't want to have to swivel chair between all these different applications. They just want to be able to automate things. And that is another need, and it's very much an integration need. So we need to be able to satisfy those. Another perspective, if you like, on those different roles is to look at how we've got the sort of long tail diagram. You'll have seen the long tail diagram before in many different aspects of modern e-commerce and the internet world and what have you. In our case, we're talking about integration and cost and complexity. There could be integration projects that are pretty expensive, traditional deep integration projects, and the ones that make business sense. They provide large business benefit. We might well pick off as big projects for traditional integration. But over more recent years, we've certainly seen a move towards the shadow departments taking on their own integration as well, and using tooling that simplifies integration between more modern systems that are more able to be integrated across, and much more cleaner tooling that allows people that are not specialists to work in it. And we class that as an integration platform as a service. Our cast iron product would fit in this category. And that allows a different category of users to get involved in creating integrations, but still probably somebody who has a technical background. On the far right-hand side, what we're seeing is that long tail, that whole load of different small integrations that a business user would really like, but it might only affect them or a few members of a small team, that's just not been possible to pick off with the tooling as it stood. And so what we're starting to see is an opportunity there to allow those users to take on their own integration, give them tooling that's straightforward enough that it's in line with the kind of software as a service products they're already using in other directions, and allow them to pick off their own integrations. And by collating all of those integrations together, we can start to get insights into what they really need and what sort of interactions are really needed, and perhaps try to get a more interesting dimension into the other integration capabilities across the board. So we really want to be able to cover all of these different styles of integration across a single suite so that we can see what's going on. So let's bring a little bit of that back into the reference architecture. So you can see up on the top right, we're recognizing that there's a same set of components required by the business teams. Some of them technical users, some of them less technical, but nonetheless they're business-led, probably business-funded, and they also have a need to do types of integration, but perhaps subtly different. Their connectivity might be digital connectivity. They need to connect to software as a service. They need intelligent connectors that focus on those sort of things, rather than the low-level connectivity to back-end mainframes and MQ queues and all the rest. So a very different style of integration that they're dealing with. It's functionally it's similar, it's logically similar, and we want to see that repetition coming up in the architecture, because it's much easier to manage an architecture if we can see some sort of repetition across it and some sort of similarity. And so what we're saying is we've got the same kind of features potentially at this stage by a couple of different areas in the company, but we're going to see in a moment that that's going to spread much wider. So a much more interesting and realistic diagram. This could be a whiteboard in the room in any workshop that I've done with customers in the last 10 years. There's a mixture of things going on here. We've got a set of systems of record that have been synchronized by the integration hub at the bottom in the typical sort of asynchronous hub and spoke style. We can see that then there's some sort of exercise just above that that's created an enterprise service bus to start exposing those capabilities more broadly inside the enterprise. Depending on your definition of ESB, it's some collection of the things in the center. And you can see out to the side, we've got new teams writing new engagement applications using microservice applications that are different to the traditional applications, broken down into much smaller components. And they've got very different needs, and they're asking for applications of data and access to data. We can also see that some of the systems of record are now coming with their own APIs. They've got their own ways of being directly connected to. And so that's changing the game as well. It's messy. It's a typical enterprise. This is what real enterprises look like. In fact, they look a lot worse than this. And so what's interesting about this is that there is some commonality. One of the pieces of commonality we can pick out straight away is the grey bars, the gateways that are representing really APIs or services, both internally and externally. Every single one of the applications needs and wants to expose a set of APIs. So it's very likely that they're going to need to expose them. And they can create the API, but what about that management layer? What about that tier that says, I want to be able to control who's actually using this? I want to be able to control the traffic. I want to know who's using it so I can tell them when I'm making changes. I want to provide a portal that makes it easier for people to get to know the interface and to use it. They could build all that out separately each time themselves, but what about if you could provide a centralized functionality that enables them to administer their own APIs? So they don't have to install Kit to do that. They don't have to learn a particularly deep technology. It might be sitting on a sophisticated gateway. So our API management capability sits on top of a data power gateway, which is one of the most sophisticated XML gateways on the market. It's now a multi-protocol gateway that manages JSON natively as well and all the rest. We sit you on top of that and say, here's an API management capability that allows you to forget the fact that you're working in that deep, complex gateway and actually enables you to administer APIs in a very straightforward fashion. So somebody from any application team can come to that capability and say, I want to expose some APIs and I want to expose them inside the enterprise. Maybe I want to promote them to outside the enterprise. And I want to take some analytics to take a look at what sort of throughput I'm getting on those APIs as well. So it becomes a federated capability. And that's what we're really looking for, is this idea that rather than a central team having to build everything for everybody, we can federate integration capabilities out into the application teams. So in a perfect world, what we would try and do is get to a stage where we could decentralize all of these integration capabilities. We'd be able to give the individual teams the integration capabilities that they need. And that might be they only require the ability to surface APIs. It might be that they're purely focused on manipulating data between a couple of cloud applications they use on a regular basis, but they don't want the sophisticated deep integration. It might be that they have to connect to deep backend systems as well. And then enable them to switch on just the pieces that they need, so use the components that they need. And equally, between those different parts of the organization, to be able to collaborate in an effective way. So when the line of business user says, well, actually, I do want to connect my cloud systems that I use together, but I also want to connect them with some of the systems of record, the deeper systems. So the centralized team should be able to expose something in a way that it pops up in their tooling so they can actually work with it and start to connect those things together. So maybe we want to synchronize the creation of a new customer in Salesforce to create that same new customer in SAP. Well, the enterprise guys should be able to bring that to the surface in a way that the line of business user can simply use it. And they can use it for all sorts of different purposes. So looking at that in broad strokes, we could say there's a kind of capability map here. This is IBM's view of all the different challenges within the hybrid integration space. You need to be able to do all the different flavors of integration, all the different application integration, APIs, moving out into Internet of Things and data. We need those core componentry capabilities, integration engines, API management capabilities. Messaging is going to be core to anything going forward as well. and secure gateways. And indeed, we need to be able to deploy those in the places that matter. So it could be that that's a software as a service. It could be that we want to place it in infrastructure as a service or on-premise. And we'd expect all of those to be enterprise scale, internet scale indeed, so that we can expand as we go and so be able to scale elastically as the business requirements change. Our primary offering in this space, and this is relatively new as a packaging, but the components within it are extremely mature. So Application Integration Suite pulls together the core pieces that we've built up over the years that solve all of the problems that we've been talking about above. So real focus at the moment on the API management aspect. That's the component underlying there is API Connect and sits on top of a data power gateway. And it also incorporates the strong loop framework and the loopback framework, which can be used to build out APIs extremely rapidly. Even for people who haven't got a particularly deep knowledge of what the typical REST conventions are, they're able to build things out extremely quickly. But we've got the ability to do this strong traffic management based on policies, build out developer portals, look at the life cycle of those APIs. And then going down into the cloud connectivity, we've got a number of different ways of moving that out. And so the aim there is that we've got a suite of native cloud connectors that understand the applications that they're talking to, so that there's a lot of intelligence in those connectors. And people who don't have a deep integration background, they might well be technical, but not necessarily a deep integration background, can move into that capability and join things together with predefined templates to help them to get started. And then the deep enterprise integration, of course, this has been bread and butter for a decade or two anyway. So you'd expect us to still retain those deep, mature connectivity capabilities and flow language support, graphical flows, right through to a multitude of different languages that you can work in as well, and advanced mediation capabilities, providing transactionality and so on. So all of those things, but brought together in meaningful ways. So what we're enabling now is for you to be creating an API that's based on back-end systems deep in the enterprise integration or in the cloud connectivity, and then surfacing that up to API management with the click of a few buttons, and it's already up there and being exposed under a new plan and a new product. So finding ways to make it easier to move across this hybrid integration suite that enables all these different possibilities. And so it's a broad remit and a lot of different characters involved in doing integration across a company, and they all need to be able to work together in meaningful ways. So let's look back at that overall architecture and just refresh ourselves in terms of the different aspects of hybrid. So we've got the user communities. We've spoken about the fact that there's at least two, possibly many different user communities that we're dealing with. Certainly the sort of central IT and the business-led IT are starting to show up as very definite divisions across organizations. We want to break down those divisions and enable those two departments to work with each other in a collaborative fashion. So creating things that each other can reuse in a more effective way. The hybrid integration styles, as we talked about, the different styles of integration exist in all of those different levels. So we need to be able to provide relevant componentry, whichever level you're at, that enables you to do application integration or API exposure or data integration, and bring that to the different parties involved. Connectivity, so there's different types of connectivity needs depending whether you're connecting to low-level systems or whether you're connecting to systems within the cloud. So we need to be able to provide the right kind of connectivity to the right user. But at the same time, we're working on common connector frameworks so that we can leverage connectors that we've created for one environment in another environment. And so we can start to see the same look and feel as we move between different environments for connecting to the same system. And so as much code share as we can create is possible, and indeed sharing of experiences as well to make it similar there. And then finally, as I mentioned, deployment. And so all of the things within the portfolio can be componentized and broken down into things that can be installed on metal, in virtual images, in Docker containers. There's containerized componentry can be pushed up into any infrastructure, whether it's a cloud infrastructure or an on-premise one. And so the options are all there, but also they're available in platforms as well. So within the Bluemix platform, You can get the integration capabilities there, and you can deploy containerized aspects of it there too. And then the next step along, of course, is that, well, maybe I don't want to see it as a thing I run, I deploy, and I manage. Could I just have someone else worry about that? And so we're providing all of our offerings as software as a service as well. So either as a platform, if it's appropriate for developing integrations, or as software as a service, if it really is something that a non-technical user comes to and just uses like a piece of software, but just completely online. And so the elements of the portfolio are available at all those different points. So that pretty much covers what I was going to cover today. We've got some references there to the Hybrid Integration Reference Architecture article, which talks to a lot of the points that we've been through today. There's an article differentiating between microservices and SOA, and there's complementary aspects to that and divergent aspects to that. And so that talks through those. And of course, you're very welcome to go and explore the products either online. Feel free to get in touch with me. That concludes all of my formal set of slides, so I'll just hand back over to Vance to see if there's any questions to take on.
Kim, excellent session. Really great top-down vision, as well as some actual implementation, hands-on business cases of how hybrid integration really helps in this digital transformation era that we're in. A really terrific session.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, Kim, we've got questions given our audience big vision for hybrid integration from the architecture point of view. We also have implementation or product specifics. Let's start with a big picture question. One of the messages that comes through to me from your presentation, Kim, is that integration now is just not an afterthought anymore. I know we've been on the brink of saying this for several years now, but right now the need for integration could arise at just about any place in an app or a data share or a workflow, and it may not always even be within IT. This idea that integration is now an enabler for so many more stakeholders in so many more places, apps, API, data, it just struck me that this might merit just a little bit of a conversation about the big picture benefits IBM sees where hybrid integration is really part of the DNA of making the agile enterprise. Can you talk a little bit about whether that's part of the vision that IBM sees and how customers are working with you to begin to achieve that?
Sure, yeah, and that's a really good point, because really integration is a business problem now. It used to be an IT problem. It used to be sort of like, we just acquired another company and we're trying to get all the customer data munged together to try and, get it all into the same system. It was all down in the weeds of complex data models and things. It's a business problem now, and it's something that's actually providing market value. So in the API economy, you're actually selling your data and you're selling the capabilities of it. It's more than just your data. You're selling the capabilities of your company in utterly new ways. So you're effectively putting yourself out there to say, here's what I've got, these are the capabilities I've got, but let me crowdsource the innovation. Let me just open it up to anybody to give it a try. And then I'll work with you as in a partnership to say how we're going to bring a new business model to the table. And that's coming from integration. And it's not just about APIs. I mean, deeper APIs tend to have complex microservices behind them. And that whole microservices territory is aimed at bringing business value. So you're building small components and microservices because you can build them at the speed of the business. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think hybrid integration is fundamental to that. And it's more fundamental because if you pick off integration in only one of the areas of hybrid, then you're going to miss the trick, because you're not going to be able to see what's happening across your organization, and you're not going to create that cohesive effect of people being able to work together.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So let me turn to one of the technical but very probably familiar questions that you get when you talk about hybrid integration to customers. In the context of service-oriented architecture and microservice architecture, what are the differences or similarities, and is there something about APIs and microservices that will make this approach more successful?
And this is probably the most common discussion I have. In a way, there's almost two different routes into this conversation. One says that microservices, and indeed APIs as well, are generation 2 of SOA. They're the next phase of SOA, and they're doing the same thing, but doing it better, doing it more market-orientated, more business-orientated. And then there's another side that sort of says, no, these were completely different objectives. And SOA was about within the enterprise, and it was about surfacing interfaces. And microservices are about building applications. They're about how we break up and componentize an application. And so although they both have the word service and the word architecture in it, they're actually diametrically different things. And we shouldn't be comparing them alongside one another. In a sense, it almost doesn't matter. There were valuable things about SOA. A lot of what we learnt was about how to standardize interfaces, and what came out of that was the degree of standardization, although it's often community standardization of REST interfaces that are used in the API world. I think it also brought to us the need to do more refactoring of applications when necessary. Many applications were just never going to cut the mustard as they stood, and real-time interfaces into them was never going to work. And microservice is often recognizing that and creating a sort of separate island of data, perhaps moving away from directly transactional interaction with the data in the system of record, so things like more eventual consistency models. And so, I think there's a lot to be learned from what we gathered from SOA over the years. Microservices and APIs, yes, they are the next generation of what's happening, but we shouldn't forget the lessons learned.
A little bit of a drill down comes in here, Kim, that I think might shed a little more light on this conversation. It simply says, we've used API gateways for many years now, but I've never seen a reference architecture that employs multiple or tiered API gateways. Can the speaker discuss how having them in that approach helps either use or helps us in IT make sure that they're efficiently used?
Sure, yeah. And I think it's interesting because when APIs first came out, the thought was very much that this was going to be something that was internet born and all APIs are going to be out on the public domain. But in fact, if it's useful there, it's useful anywhere, right? So let's start doing it between different divisions, between large companies. Let's use it to create partner interfaces with business partners that we can control. And all of those are effectively different usages of the same idea of standardizing an API. They may well appear to be at least administered differently. But as I said in the talk, although they're administered differently, in many cases they can be actually sharing an infrastructure. So you can effectively multi-tenant a single infrastructure of API management and have it for radically different uses all at the same time. But it kind of democratizes it. It means that an application team can take complete control of their area of APIs and run things the way they want, rather than feeling that they're going back to a central team and saying, please can I have another interface? It's in their domain. It's something they can work with.
Here's a question about who does integration. You had a couple of slides of the Venn diagram or the overlapping boxes between LOB and IT, and this kind of caught my eye too, Kim. I understand the different roles and stakeholders that may use integration will likely do it independently, but does your referent architecture also support the idea that these roles would collaborate to do integration? And if so, how does the reference architecture support that use case?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting challenge here is how we surface things from one area of the business to another in a way that's valuable to them. Now, let me drill into that a little bit. So say you're a business user, you're using your CRM system at Salesforce, and you've got new orders coming in and you want to reflect those in some related order management system or get them through to some warehousing system or something like that. As a business user, you're really not able to do that kind of deep integration. But at the same time, you don't want to go off and create a unique IT project that has one purpose and one purpose only. And so you want to be able to go and chat to your IT guys and say, look, I want to be able to talk to the warehousing system or to the SAP system on a regular basis to do lots of different integrations. Could you just surface it in a way I can see? And so what we're enabling is we've got a new product called App Connect, which is focused on that business user context at the moment and moving into the iPaaS user context as well. And we're saying we want central IT to be able to pop the triggers, the events effectively that can happen in a backend system, pick a set of relevant events that you want that set of users to be able to see, and pick a set of actions that they should be able to perform on the backend systems, and then allow them to just manipulate those as they see fit. So central IT have still got control as to how you can connect to the back-end systems. But the line of business user or the line of business technical specialist has much more flexibility to go and create an integration when they need it, rather than having to come back to central IT. And it's that collaboration between the two sides that's really much more powerful, because you're leveraging each other's best, if you like. The business guys have the knowledge of what integrations they need on a daily basis. The deep technical specialists know how to get that, unlock the data and the events from those back-end systems. And there's a number of aspects to that. Obviously, some of it comes down to what action should be allowed to take, and some of it comes down to what data should I be able to see. So a lot of this happens at the surface layer when we're exposing things as an API. So again, something that an application team can take on themselves. And so there's a lot of control over who's able to even see that an API exists, never mind whether they can decide to use it or not. We can then provide a collection of different APIs together, and different roles can have different collections of resources that they can touch and not touch, and which verbs they can perform upon them. And then, of course, down to the data level itself, we can perform redaction on the individual data elements of the fields. So there's a lot of excitement from central IT to say, this is great, I'm going to get much better insight into the kind of integrations that they need, and I'm going to get some idea of the kind of volumes and the movement of things that are going on and what's valuable to the business. And then the same from the business side, they're saying, this is fabulous, I've now got a better way of having a conversation with IT. Because instead of having to give them word for word exactly what kind of integrations I need, I can just say, surface me useful capabilities, useful triggers and actions. I'll go and do the interesting stuff that's going to actually, bring in the business value. But you just use your knowledge and unlock the back-end systems.
Excellent, excellent. Kim, I see time is just about up, and we spent a lot of time about the vision and the reference architecture and the capabilities. I know there's also products or services with real SKUs that are behind all this magic, and our audience loves to experiment and get into sandboxes and take proof of concepts. Can you give us a rundown of the products that are available now here in mid to late 2016 and how folks might be able to get their hands on them?
Sure. So I would focus people's attention, because we're talking about hybrid, on the application integration suite as a whole. So look for that, and then look for the capabilities that are sitting underneath that. You can get in and experiment with all of those individual components. Some of you will recognize some of those from the past, and some of them will be new to you. But the application integration suite houses IBM Integration Bus, it houses a cast iron, and it has its API Connect, all into the same suite, and you can move around within those capabilities. And all of those have very easy exploration, try before you buy, that sort of thing. So you can download developer editions, or you can experiment with them as software as a service. So that's certainly available. And I would also encourage people to keep a close eye on where we go with App Connect, which is closely related to the suite as well, and is powering that new citizen integrator view.
Great session. Kim Clark, Integration Architect, IBM Offering Management for the IBM Integration Portfolio. Really great overview of hybrid integration, simply from a point of view of where the whole integration space is going over the next several years, but also ways that it's going to help tactically with delivering some really key digital business initiatives. Terrific session.
Great, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
And as we love to do here at the Enterprise Integration Summit, Kim mentions many resources. We're going to be able to put some here on this for more information slide. Of course, we've got some great downloads and some links to those cloud-based trials that he mentioned right here in the breakout room under the viewing screen. Here are some others that are in this closing slide. Thanks again, everyone.